hello there. We are Team Cleopatra. We are presenting Cleopatra, the movie that came out in 1963, and our primary source is Plutarch Lives. My name is Hector Gallegos.
My name is Mauro Cadena.
My name is Nicole Galvan.
And my name is Taylor Espinosa.
In this presentation, we will be discussing the movie Cleopatra, which came out in 1963. And we will also be making comparisons between Cleopatra and our primary source called Plutarch Lives, which is based off of a Greek philosopher, and historian named Plutarch. And we hope to bring more insight between the situations that are talked about between Plutarch Lives and the events that take place in the movie Cleopatra, which begins at the Battle of Pharsalus. I'm so sorry about that, where Julius Caesar defeats Pompey's army, and it carries on into his journey into Egypt. Cleopatra, the movie, was released in 1963, and it was directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz. And of course, the cast involves Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, Rex Harrison as Julius Caesar, Richard Burton as Mark Antony, Roddy McDowall as Gaius Octavius, and Martin Landau as Rufio. I hope I said that correctly. And of course, the team of the movie production, the production team, of course, visited Italy, Egypt, and Spain to draw inspiration for the locations of the sets that they filmed in. They mainly filmed in England, and it took about $44 million to make. And of course, this film was made during the rise of when Hollywood was getting its feet back and running again. Plutarch Lives, Volume 2.
Continuation. The name of the author is Plutarch, and he wrote the book called Plutarch's Lives, Volume 2. And our presentation is mainly attributed to the chapter of Mark Antony. Plutarch was a man born in Greece in the year of 46 AD to 119 AD in the city of Cheronia. Plutarch was a historian who was born under the reign of Emperor Claudius. Emperor Claudius being the fourth member of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. He was the second to last emperor before Nero. He didn't ultimately start writing his works until the 2nd century. This would be about the time when Trajan was emperor, so it was at the height of the empire. However, according to the academic website called Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy, it is mentioned that Plutarch studied under a man named Ammonius in Athens. Unfortunately, it is not known where Plutarch wrote parallel lives. Additionally, he lived in Cheronia, where he wrote his book called Plutarch Lives in the 2nd century. According to the website called Purdue University, it states that he also relied extensively on the personal memoirs of people such as Sulla, the first dictator of the Roman Republic, Lucius, and Caesar. Equally, throughout oppositely biased in his content, leaning towards the sensational, Plutarch nevertheless relied on available sources for everything he wrote when he was writing for the section of Mark Antony.
Film analysis. Cleopatra plays out the tragic lives of Queen Cleopatra and Mark Antony. These two historical figures, who seem to have it all, will soon meet their unfortunate fate. Film breakdown. We will see the breakdown of 3 major points, not only of the film, but in ancient history. The first breakdown being the cremation of Caesar's body. Caesar, who was murdered by senators Cassius, Brutus, and their supporters, stabbed Caesar on his chest and back 27 times until he died. Caesar was deified after his death, and that was an honor in itself since very few Romans have been deified after their death. The Temple of Caesar was made on the site where he was cremated to house his cult. It became an important place of sacrifices and other ceremonies. The second film breakdown, being Mark Antony's role, is revealed by Octavian. Octavian exposes Mark Antony's role to the public. Plutarch tells us that Octavian reads to the Senate that Mark Antony's will states, I, Mark Antony, was to be buried upon my death next to my wife in the beautiful city of Alexandria. This led for all of Rome to support Octavian to strip Mark Antony of his political title and led to a war in Egypt. This also leads to Octavian becoming the first king of Rome. The third breakdown, Cleopatra's suicide. Cleopatra's suicide marked the end of the Hellenistic period in Egypt, and it also marked the beginning of of Roman having a prominence inside of Egypt. These three major events not only played a big part in the film, but also ancient history.
Okay, so this is going to be about the critics and historians' reaction to the film and what type of reviews they had about it. So the director, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, obviously filmed this drama of Cleopatra, and it tells the story of Cleopatra's attempt to restore the Egyptian empire by deceiving Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. This trio is probably known as one of history's biggest love triangle to ever be captured on film. And the 1963 movie Cleopatra had a profound effect on not just the film industry, but also how people viewed and comprehended the historical figures as well. The comments expressed about this movie covered a wide range of different opinions and certain critiques. Some believed it lacked information or inaccurately portrayed the historical characters in the film. And also, others referred to it as one of the best and largest film productions of all time. This critic review was from the website The Hollywood Reporter piece, and this critic named James Powers quoted, Cleopatra is not a great movie, but it is primarily a vast, popular entertainment that sidesteps total greatness for broader appeal. This is not an adverse criticism, but a notation of achievement. Here he states that although Cleopatra is not the best film, it was a huge adverse for criticism in the entertainment, because when it released in 1963, it had a huge impact on the film industry. And it is described here as the most outstanding and expensively made movie of the 20th century. Here is a historian author review. In the website NPR, writer Ralph Eubanks discusses the work of a historian author who writes books about various historical figures. Her name is Stacy Schiff, and she has written many different books about not just the lives. She has a book about Cleopatra and the lives and the things and events that happened in Cleopatra's life. And she also has many other books about other historical figures and events. So according to him, he quoted, Stacy Schiff argues that the Egyptian queen of gossip and legend, as well as literature and Hollywood directors, is largely inaccurate. It is not the historical events themselves that are being criticized here as being incorrect, but in the 1963 movie, but rather how Cleopatra's character is depicted. He kind of puts there that she quoted, she is being seen in the eyes of the men in the film, and she wants her to be seen more as how smart and how much of a genius she was in real life. So
Mm.
here you go. And this is going to talk about some of the historical sources used in the film by the directors. This film was about Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, and Cleopatra, and they were the main focus of this movie. And it is evident that the filmmakers and producers of this film had to consult a variety of historical sources in order to incorporate the most accurate material they could. They got stories from historians like, of course, our primary source, Plutarch Lives, writers and authors like Charles Marie Francero, and even a few of Shakespeare's tales because he wrote tales of Antony and Cleopatra and also all three, Antony, Cleopatra, and Julius Caesar. In this academic paper, it claims that their final screenplay, nominally based on Carlo Maria Francero, 1957 biography, The Life and Times of Cleopatra, also drew on Shakespeare's Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra, George Bernard Shaw's Caesar and Cleopatra, as well as the accounts of ancient historians, notably Plutarch, Suetonius, Appian, Dio Cassius, and Cicero, as reliable or unreliable, since none of them were contemporaneous with the historical figures as the latter may have been. Despite the fact that this film was made at a time when the motion picture industry was just at its peak, it had a significant influence on how historical events were portrayed in films and elevated historical personalities such as Cleopatra herself.
Comparison between Cleopatra and Plutarch's life. The film and the book shows how Cleopatra worked her charm to make Caesar and Antony fall for her. In the book, Plutarch writes that Cleopatra uses her looks and expectations of women to manipulate Antony through her aspiration of dominance. Similar to the book, the film Cleopatra displays how Cleopatra uses her sexuality and power to make not only Antony fall in love with her, but Caesar as well. The movie's version is mostly similar to Plutarch in that Cleopatra is in her quest for domination and is the cause of the destruction of Caesar and Antony, and in the end herself, and it shows in the book, in both the book and the movie. The movie shows that Cleopatra shows her cunning ways and even makes Antony fall in love with her, where she stands in various ways to make sure her beauty stands out to both men. In the book, there isn't much mention about Octavian. There was only one time he was mentioned, and it was in the page 488, and that's it. But in the movie, it was different. He showed up more. And one of my favorite scenes of Octavian is when he is talking to the Senate about declaring war on Egypt. Another scene from the movie would be when Octavian is talking to Cleopatra about taking her to Rome and promising her nothing will happen to her. Another scene shows that Octavian finding out that Antony is dead. He shows anger towards the man who told him that Antony was dead. Antony was allowed to ride with him the whole journey in his carriage. In the movie, it shows their friendship much more. For example, at the beginning of the movie, after defeating Pompey's forces, Flavius arrives to tell Caesar one of his men has arrived and asks if it was Antony before anyone else. Later in the movie, as Caesar is told by Antony he would only be made emperor of the Roman Empire outside of Rome, Antony tries to show his loyalty to Caesar by telling that no matter what he has made the empire of, he will always follow him and take his legions with him. In the movie, Antony went along with Caesar's will after his death and named Octavian his heir as he wished. Even after his death, Antony followed Caesar and even hunted down his killers. He even told Cleopatra that even after his death, Caesar must be granted the title he was not given. The things I would do differently about the film. The first thing that I would that I would be doing differently about the movie would be telling the producers of the movie to make it much shorter in length, about making it much more shorter in length. It is a bit long for its runtime. I think it would benefit the movie if it had a much shorter runtime.
I feel like if it
Additionally,
also, I'm so sorry, Mauro. I feel like if it also had a shorter runtime, they could have portrayed things a little bit more better. I feel like they could have also portrayed the background and kind of like the costumes of the characters a little bit more accurately, rather than having it be filled with just Hollywood magic.
yeah, I would definitely agree to that. I think the movie is a little bit boggled down because of its runtime. I think maybe cutting it like an hour and a half would have been a lot better because it would be more streamlined, the plot, and it would be a lot more, I don't know, I guess more actiony in a way because it was a little bit too romantic.
And we
Yeah,
Additional,
I would have to agree with that because if I remember right, when reading about the movie, that they had 2 to 3 intermissions, and the movies were seen more as how Nicole had said a love triangle or like a romantic drama movie more than a historical movie.
the only the other thing I would do differently if I were to change something about the movie would be that I would like to add more battles in the movie. I think that the one thing the movie lacked in its overall and its final presentation, I think it would have made the movie a lot better. One of the examples I really like would be the Battle of Actium. I think that the movie did a real good job with that scene. I wish there could have been more battles mentioned in the movie. Others I would have liked to other battles I would have liked to see would be the Battle of Pharsalus. I think that would have made a perfect start to the movie because it represents the fact that it would have had shown the tension between Caesar and Pompey in both of them trying to get the power back in Rome. The the last thing I would have done differently in the movie would have been to get more interactions with more of the side characters in the movie. I think it would have been interesting to see more of the characters of Marcus Agrippa, who was the commander of the army at the Battle of Actium, King Ptolemy the 14th, 13, I think it's 13, Octavian and Pompey. I think these characters deserve more than a mention in the movie. They deserve a much bigger role in the movie because I think that the movie focuses too much on the lovers of Cleopatra and not enough on the other things that eventually led to the demise of these historical people involved with the Roman Republic at the time. I, oh,
Sorry.
I also
I
feel
would.
that, I'm so sorry again, Mauro. I also feel like these side characters in the movies actually had a lot
Mhm.
more impact in actual history. Of course, you have Octavian, who soon became the Emperor of Rome, if I'm not correct.
Yeah,
Um,
he was the first Roman emperor
Mhm.
of the very first Roman emperor. I think it would have been amazing if they yeah, like I said earlier, if they showed the Battle of Pharsalus because it would have introduced the story in a much better light than if it didn't really because it kind of doesn't show that the tension between them and the tension between Caesar and Pompey because it literally just shows the
ending of the battle,
the
the
uh,
conclusion.
no, not that. It shows the his head being in the jar and it being presented to Caesar, which is historically accurate, but I wish they would have shown a little bit more of a backstory to that battle, which eventually led him to go to Egypt.
Conclusion. Our presentation teaches us more about the movie and historical period it reflects by analyzing where where the movie received its information and how closely it follows the actual history. Films have immense impact on how people see history. We have learned from our review that the understanding of historical events and historical figures may be influenced by the fictional stories and historical facts.
Any final remarks?
Yeah, I just wish the movie was a lot shorter, you know. It's too long. Literally, it's too long.
Nicole, Kayla?
Overall, I did really enjoy this presentation. But I mean, the movie, yes, it was really long. But I do think that learning about Cleopatra was probably the most interesting part about this presentation.
Yeah, I feel like working on this having this discussion throughout the whole semester was very intriguing, and I feel like we all learned more as a group when we all worked in together and put in our parts. That we learned so much about not only about a lot about Cleopatra, but also about the Romans and what they had to play in her life and how she played a big part of her life as well towards the Romans.